Gildan Media, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Hope-Driven Leader, Harness the Power of Positivity by Libby Gill, narrated by Libby Gill. Chapter 1. Harnessing Hope, Jet Fuel for the Journey of Work and Life. He who has health has hope, and he who has hope has everything. Arabic proverb. I got my first big career break when I was hired by a television production and distribution company founded by the legendary TV producer Norman Lear, creator of such hits as All in the Family. Prior to that, I had knocked around Hollywood for almost a decade, working as a studio temp or production assistant, or one too hot summer as a tap dancing bear at a local amusement park. I was beyond thrilled when I landed a job at Lear's Embassy Communications, a job that included a parking space and healthcare benefits. I had finally arrived. But the dawn of the morning I was scheduled to start as executive assistant to the VP of Public Relations and Promotion, I got a call from my father in Florida that threw off not only my start date, but also my way of looking at the world. My dad had left a message on my answering machine, remember those? The night before, that was so garbled I couldn't tell what he was saying. It was late when I got the message, so I decided I would call him in the morning. He called a second time around 5 a.m. to tell me that my stepmother, Fran, with whom I'd spent a big portion of my life, had committed suicide. There was nothing I could do but call the office and tell my new boss that I'd have to start a week later. I didn't tell him the reason. I didn't tell anyone. I just went home to Florida and helped my dad plan a funeral and clean out Fran's closets. When I got back to work the next week, something had changed. The new job and the new boss were exactly as expected, but something felt terribly wrong. Me. I'd come back from Florida where I'd had a less than happy childhood, punctuated by a revolving door of step-siblings, multiple household relocations, and 6 high schools over the course of 6 years, feeling lost and broken. I'd suffered the same tragedies as lots of people. Okay, maybe more than some, but still I couldn't seem to find my equilibrium. So I did the only thing I knew how to do, work. It was as if Fran's suicide had woken me to the fact that time was precious, and I didn't want to waste it on bad decisions, unsatisfying relationships, or work that didn't fulfill me. But I felt so powerless in my little job and my little apartment, I had no idea what or how to change. One particularly lonely night several months after Fran had died, my roommate was away for the weekend, and I wandered into the kitchen to look for something that would either numb or comfort me. Neither of us took drugs, so that was out. There wasn't any chocolate in the house, so that wasn't an option. But I found a big bottle of brandy from some long-ago recipe and decided that would have to do the trick. I downed a glass, then another. Then the thought struck me that I had never tried on Fran's mink coat, my sole inheritance, which my father had insisted I take home with me after her funeral. I opened my closet, unzipped the garment back, and put on that coat. To my great surprise, the weight of the fur, or maybe the weight of my own pain, brought me to my knees. I stumbled, then crawled into the hallway of my apartment, still wrapped in the mink, the bottle of brandy in my hand. I stayed there crying my eyes out for what might have been the entire weekend, grateful that the couple downstairs were deaf and couldn't hear my sobs. As I lay on the floor, a thought suddenly popped into my mind. I had absolutely no idea what the strange phrase meant at the time, but it stuck with me like a mantra for years. Hope and tools. About the time I started my own business as an executive coach and leadership consultant, I found myself expanding on that mantra, particularly the hope piece, as the one quality no one could afford to be without, the jet fuel for the journey of work and life. Although I had never intended to pursue public relations as a career, I dug into my new role with a zeal that belied my natural introversion. I worked crazy hours, often dealing with crazy people. But I enjoyed the challenge of learning the entertainment business and assisting my boss in securing press coverage for our executives, stars, and TV series. When one of the staff publicists, oddly enough also named Libby, decided to leave to start her own firm, I surprised myself by marching into my boss's office and asking for her job. My boss told me that he planned to interview several candidates, but would be happy to include me in the mix. However, he warned me sternly, if he promoted me to publicist and it didn't work out, my old job would be filled and I'd have to leave the company. Not a problem, I told him, with more confidence than I felt. I got the job, my first promotion in less than a year. After that, the friendly mid-sized company I thought I had joined was bought by Columbia Pictures, then Coca-Cola, and eventually became part of Sony Pictures Entertainment. With each reorganization, I raised my hand and asked for more. Volunteer and figure it out later became my modus operandi. In just 5 years, I moved up the corporate food chain from assistant to publicist to manager to director. And just a year later, I took over my old boss's role, albeit on a larger scale, as vice president of publicity, advertising, and promotion for Sony's worldwide television group. Despite my doubts and insecurities about my value, and they were considerable, I knew deep inside that I had the power to improve my life. It was years before I understood the real significance of hope, and that the mysterious mantra, hope and tools, that popped into my head that particularly lonely night would be instrumental in helping propel me and eventually the people I helped past the inevitable obstacles we faced on our way to a better future. What is hope theory? We've all heard the saying, hope is not a strategy. Yet having motivated and managed people for nearly 30 years, I've observed again and again how ineffective it is to provide people with strategies or resources when they're feeling hopeless. It's like giving a worker a power tool with no electricity. Utterly useless. Instead, by instilling an individual or an organization with a sense of hopefulness, we can guide them to connect the beliefs to the behaviors that will ultimately help them realize their vision. That's what this book is about, belief driving behavior based on the science of hope theory, which stems from a body of research from the medical and positive psychology communities that tells us that hope, unlike its emotional cousins happiness and optimism, is specific, situational, and future-focused. Before we go any further, let's discuss the science of hope theory and what it means to you. The word hope is derived from the Old English word hopian, which literally means to leap forward with expectation. Hope plays such a pivotal part in our lives that scientists have endeavored to define its role and determine how it affects our daily existence. The concept was pioneered by the late Dr. C.R. Snyder, a professor of psychology, and from 1974 to 2001, director of the graduate training program in clinical psychology at the University of Kansas at Lawrence. Encouraged by the noted psychiatrist Dr. Carl Menninger, who once spoke about hope at a conference of the American Psychiatric Association, only to have his concepts derided by his colleagues, Dr. Snyder became intrigued with the significance of hope and its role in helping us reach our goals. Willpower and way power. Snyder defined hope as based on both willpower and way power, where one is not only able to create the pathways to realizing a vision, but also to sustain the mental energy and perseverance to travel those pathways effectively. He likened this process to the saying, "Where there's a will, there's a way," citing both elements as critical to success. Today, with the world and workplace focused on ideas and innovation rather than merely output, the most successful people are often the most hopeful. One of the primary reasons is because they see multiple pathways rather than the way to arrive at a successful outcome. Dr. Snyder's research demonstrates that people with a high level of hope, not to be confused with optimism, which is a generalized outlook on life independent of one's actions and circumstances, are more likely than non-hopeful people to set a great number of goals, have goals that may be more difficult to attain, be more successful at reaching their goals, and have less distress and greater happiness than low hope people. Belief and expectation. Adding to the pioneering work of Dr. Snyder is Harvard-trained oncologist Dr. Jerome Groopman, one of the world's leading researchers on cancer and AIDS. Author of How Doctors Think and the Anatomy of Hope, Dr. Groopman believes that hope consists of two key components, belief and expectation. More specifically, belief that change is possible and the expectation that the actions of an individual can result in a better future. As a clinician, Dr. Groopman learned that when he gave cancer patients too much information regarding their prognosis, he often robbed them of hopefulness, which he and many other scientists believe is instrumental in the healing process. On the other hand, when he gave them too limited information, he ran the risk of creating the false impression that they had little about which to be concerned. It was the challenge of finding that delicate balance between true hope and false hope that propelled Dr. Groopman to advance the research in the field of hope theory. What Groopman's research makes clear is that, unlike wishfulness or positive thinking without action, hope can have a physiological impact on the brain, releasing powerful chemicals like enkephalins and endorphins that help us endure pain and boost our immune system. How belief drives behavior. Although Snyder and Groopman approached hope theory from different perspectives, medicine and psychology, it's clear that both saw it as a combination of feelings and actions. Or as I see it, it's the interconnection between beliefs and behaviors. If you believe that change is possible and that your actions will have a positive influence on outcomes, you're less likely to defend the status quo and more likely to take positive risks, inspiring others with your behavior. Conversely, if you believe the opposite is true, that change is impossible, and it makes absolutely no difference what actions you take, you're apt to stay stuck in mediocrity. Or as Henry Ford famously put it, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. So why are some people and companies eternally energized with a sense of hopefulness, while others are perpetually stuck in the hope-starved doldrums? How do some leaders manage to inspire an anything-is-possible confidence in their teams, while others struggle to keep employees even marginally engaged? How do some people stay so connected to their vision that even serious setbacks like illness, loss of a loved one, or a job layoff don't deter them? Are you settling for second best? As I found my path in the professional world, I was proud that I had discovered an area in which I could excel, yet some nagging voice in the back of my head continued to remind me that PR wasn't what I really wanted to do. I wanted to work as a writer or in a creative role in film or television. Yet I canceled interviews and shied away from connections that could have furthered that goal, convincing myself that no one would ever hire me for my skills or talent. Instead, I settled for second best. Not that public relations was a bad career choice. It allowed me to buy a house, care for my family, and come in contact with some truly brilliant people. But if I ask myself, which I rarely did, what I wanted to do with my life, a career in PR wasn't even on the list. I had let fear become my guide. It took me until my mid-40s to figure out who I was and what I wanted in my personal and professional life. Having survived a tumultuous childhood and a rocky young adulthood, I'd come out the other side and had the battle scars to prove it. Eventually, the old me just didn't fit anymore. In just 1 year, I left my corporate job, started my own business, published my first book, got divorced, lost 30 pounds, and started over. It wasn't an easy year, and I don't wish that on you. Rather, my goal with this book is to offer you a roadmap in how hope can fuel the positive beliefs and drive the meaningful behaviors that get you where you want to go. We often hear the term settling regarding romantic relationships, Did you settle for your significant other because you didn't want to be alone? Did you settle because it was simply too frightening to go out and find someone new? Or did you settle because not doing so would mean that you'd have to look at yourself under the microscope and see what you needed to fix about you? Settling can happen in any part of your life: work, family, health, finances. Not that you can control every event. Bad things really do happen to good people. But if you know there's more you can do, have, or become, and you don't strive for it, then perhaps you deserve what you get. Harsh, I know, but that's the reality. Ask yourself if you've ever experienced any of these signals that you're settling. 7 signals that you're settling. You have a dream or goal stuck way in the back of your head, but you never seem to take any action toward it. Maybe it's changing careers, starting a business, having a child, or running a marathon. It's like an earworm, also known as stuck song syndrome or musical imagery repetition, and no, I didn't make up those terms, that catchy melody or unforgettable lyric that you can't get out of your mind long after the music stops playing. You try to ignore it, but it's always in the background, drumming that beat in your head and heart. You're living the someday syndrome, keeping your goal in the later on in life category. Guess what? You don't know how long you have on this earth. Do you really want to wait around and see if you can squeeze in something you know in your heart of hearts is truly meaningful to you? You've let the green-eyed monster of envy and jealousy take up permanent residence in your gut. When you see other people succeeding, you find some way to attribute it to their education, money, nepotism, or just dumb luck. You tell yourself that they have all the advantages that you don't. Even if some or all of those beliefs are true, so what? By convincing yourself that if only you had all the great stuff those successful people do, you'd be successful too, you're letting yourself off the hook from facing the reality of your situation, whatever it is, and doing the work that will get you where you want to be. You've got a shrink-to-fit personality. You may have big dreams, but you tell yourself they're just not realistic. Instead, it's okay to keep plugging away at this safe, boring little job, or to stick with playing small rather than risk ruffling anyone's feathers, or worse, risk failing at something. You're like one of those amusement park whack-a-moles. If you just stay safely underground, no one can ever smack you back down. You're a substitution junkie. Rather than get your high by fulfilling your dreams, you become obsessed with food, alcohol, television, news, social media, or other diversions. Don't get me wrong. I'm a food and wine person of the first order, but I don't kid myself that earthly pleasures, including TV and movies, 2 more of my faves, are any kind of substitute for purposeful work or meaningful relationships. You're a perpetual blamer of others. If you can't have what you really want, it's somebody else's fault. It's your boss holding you back, or the government, the job market, your childhood, or spouse. You can find a million excuses outside yourself for not getting what you want, but you know that the only one to blame is you. You're hope-starved. Rather than feeding on positive ideas and inspiring people, you let the negatives of the world, and there are plenty of them, become your constant diet. You tell yourself that you don't have what it takes. You don't know how to get ahead. You don't have the right skills or certifications. You're too old, too young, too dumb, too smart, or too whatever. The truth is, you've let your positive vision of the future get buried under other people's negative rubble. It's time to start digging out. Awareness that you're settling for less than you deserve could be the kick in the rear end that you need to start focusing on what you really want. And even if you don't particularly feel like you're settling, let's see how the practice of mentally connecting our present to our future can help us realize our vision. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. We hear a lot about living in the moment. And while single-minded focus on the present is a great tool for productivity as well as relaxation, it's critical that we also live in the future. In his book, Personal Intelligence, the Power of Personality and How It Shapes Our Lives, renowned psychologist John D. Mayer, one of the originators of the concept of emotional intelligence, theorizes that the more vividly we can imagine our future selves, the more similar we become to the self we imagine. In studying the differences between people who focus more on the present and those who focus on the future, former Stanford psychologists Philip G. Zimbardo and John N. Boyd discovered that present-focused people tended to experience more spontaneity and freedom, but were also more prone to high-risk behaviors like substance abuse than their future-focused counterparts. By contrast, people who are more mindful of the future, particularly when that future is realistic and attainable, tend to take greater stewardship over their present lives so they can reach the future they've imagined. How closely we are able to align our present selves with our future selves can be a major indicator of the degree of success we experience. In another Stanford experiment, Hal Ersner Hirschfield devised a simple method of measuring this alignment. He gave study participants a diagram with 7 pairs of circles marked present self and future self. The first 2 circles did not overlap, indicating that there was little or no connection between those 2 selves, while subsequent pairs overlapped more and more. The final pair of circles overlapped significantly, showing a close connection between selves. The participants were asked to identify which set of circles most closely resembled how they saw themselves in terms of who they were now and who they realistically hoped to become. Not surprisingly, the people who felt most aligned with their future selves tended to make better long-term decisions, whether related to amassing wealth or taking care of their health. Hope, with its emphasis on belief-driving behavior, is the critical component that links present to future. As you listen to this book, think about the beliefs and behaviors that will help you close the gap between who you are today and who you want to be tomorrow. Hopeful habits. At the end of every chapter of The Hope-Driven Leader, you'll find a section called Hopeful Habits that includes a top-line summary of the key takeaway from the chapter and a positive concept summed up as a hopeful belief for you to ponder, accept, or adapt, or reject as you see fit. Following that, you'll see an accompanying hopeful behavior that will translate that idea into action. While it's great to understand these concepts intellectually, it's only by seeing what works for you and then making those behaviors habitual that you will begin to experience exponential growth and change. Good luck on your road to hopeful discovery. Key takeaway number 1. Hope is the jet fuel for the journey of work and life. While we've been taught to believe that hope is not a strategy, hope must be present before the application of strategies and resources for us to make full use of the tools that lead to positive change. Hopeful belief number 1. Now that we've seen how critical and scientifically valid it is to link your current life with your future goals, let's begin to visualize that future self. We can start by putting a twist on the question we've all been asked as kids. Instead of, what do you want to be when you grow up? Ask yourself, who do you want to be when you grow up? What positive personality traits do you currently see in yourself that you'd like to develop over time? These might include being adventurous, intellectually curious, health-minded, and or financially savvy. Now ask yourself the opposite. What less appealing traits would you like to minimize over time? These could include overspending, bad nutrition or exercise habits, and or reluctance to go after the promotion or job you want. In other words, begin to imagine the next iteration of you. Be aware of the gap and what you need to do to close it. Hopeful behavior number 1. Pick one positive trait that you currently see as part of your personality. Now, add an action that would amplify the positive trait. For example, if you said you wanted to develop your intellectual curiosity, you might consider taking a class, attending a seminar, or listening to an audio series that would expand your skills or knowledge. Next, pick the negative trait you wish to minimize over time. If you determine that your finance savvy is not up to par, pick an action that would begin to build that muscle. Perhaps you'll decide to meet with an investment advisor, overhaul your college or retirement plans, or take a seminar in financial planning. By consciously focusing on your beliefs, both positive and negative, you can begin to identify behaviors to expand and develop your best future self. In Chapter 2, we'll discuss the history of hope to see how the concept has developed in literature and theology over time. Chapter 2. What's hope got to do with it? The science and significance of hope theory. Hope is the dream of a waking man, Aristotle. You probably know the story of the first man and woman from the Bible's book of Genesis, Adam and Eve, but you may not be as familiar with the Greek myth about the first woman, Pandora. In Works and Days, written by 8th century BC poet Hesiod, he talks about the golden age when men were immortal and dwelled on Olympus, which ended when Prometheus stole fire and brought it down to earth. Zeus, the supreme god of the Olympians, was so angry he had Hephaestus, the Greek god of smiths and craftsmen, fashion a beautiful and cunning woman out of clay and sent her to earth to become the bride of Prometheus's foolish younger brother, Epimetheus. Prometheus, fearing retribution from Zeus for his theft of fire, warned his brother not to accept anything from Zeus. However, Epimetheus ignored him and took Pandora as his bride, along with Zeus's wedding gift of a storage jar, later described as a box. Unable to resist her curiosity, Pandora promptly opened the jar, unleashing all manner of evil spirits to plague mankind forever. Seeing what she'd done, Pandora swiftly slammed the lid of the jar shut. But it was too late. To make matters worse, she trapped only one remaining spirit inside the jar: hope. There's some surprisingly lively debate among classic scholars and historians about whether hope was sealed inside the jar to ensure man's suffering or to mitigate it. As a hopeful, half-full kind of person, I prefer to think that rather than withholding hope, the gods offered it as an antidote for our worldly ills. In this chapter, we'll look at the science and history of hope theory to shed some light on its origins as well as its applications to your life. What is hope? Though their definitions may differ, the idea of hope has resonated with writers, poets, philosophers, and theologians for centuries. In some religions, hope is considered a necessary ingredient for an individual or group to reach heaven. In others, hope is the spiritual byproduct, a gift given to those who live lives of piety. In the Christian religion, the three theological virtues, hope, faith, and charity, are cited as the traits needed to live a good and moral life. Unlike the cardinal or moral virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, which may be practiced by anyone, the theological virtues are thought to be God-given and are first mentioned in Christian literature in St. Paul's letter to the Thessalonians in 1 Corinthians 13. Hope is cited more than 100 times in the King James Bible, its meaning spanning from trust to deliverance from enemies. Not coincidentally, it's also the basic theme for many of the Negro spirituals passed down among slaves. In Hindu literature, hope is referred to as praditi or apeksh, and typically refers to desire and expectation. The Hindu book of Vishnu Smriti, a holy text of prose and verse told in 100 chapters, contains a dialogue between the god Vishnu and the goddess Earth, or Prithvi, after Vishnu rescues Earth from...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?